Hello.
Sunday night and safely back in Yorkshire from our kids in Edinburgh. 5 days, action packed as usual, and combination of enjoyments, entertainments, films, spotting celebrities occasionally, and exhibitions. And well, it's always good
And
to be there.
trams. Don't forget
And
trams,
and
Charles.
trams. Trams were the
Look,
big.
we
They were the super tram. They were the big hit. It has to be said that.
look, yeah, well, for the first time ever, we went to
Mm.
Grangemouth to Edinburgh each day by park and ride and tram, thus making us Britain's most green film critics.
Yeah, you're quite right, Graham. And all is actually at a very sensible price, and that is
Well,
to be
yeah, the fact it
encouraged.
was cheap as chips to use the tram was irrelevant. I was doing it purely to save the planet.
You were doing it really? Oh,
Mm.
well, that's not what you ever mentioned while we were there for 5 days. But I'm glad that you've got a revisionist theory on it all there. But you're quite right. It did kind of make me think, why on earth has a tram system not come to Leeds after all? And it
The
was
money
cancelled
is
for
the
money,
answer.
money, money. And
Mm.
all credit to the Scottish government for doing a system that is efficient, well run, and particularly one of the guards on duty who was
Oh
fastidious,
wow, she
fastidious at
was
all.
she was fierce. You wouldn't cross her.
No, absolutely not. So our primary reason for going to Edinburgh was the return of the film festival. This was the Edinburgh International Film Festival, 76th year of the festival, and we've covered the kind of background scenario of how this festival had been not just under threat, but really looked like it might not happen. A combination of the Edinburgh International Festival, Scottish Screen, and the Scottish Government have led to the festival taking place, a compact version of the festival, and concentrated primarily on the Everyman and on the View Omni cinemas, which are near the Edinburgh Playhouse and before you head down to Leith. It's that
Yeah.
end, Edinburgh St James's Centre. Whereas the traditional in the past, of course, when we walked past the film house, and that was a depressing sight with it being currently
All boarded up.
boarded up, which was a pretty sad sight to see, of course. But we'll keep seeing exactly how what pans out there.
Although it was a smaller program, I thought the mix of films and the quality and the international nature. But what was different was the film house feels like the home of Edinburgh National Film Festival. It feels like every man because it's really luxurious. But
Yeah,
it's only fake art house. It's not a real independent
no,
cinema. And the View Omni, it's an efficient, decent place to watch films. But again, it doesn't feel
mm,
like an art house cinema. So it's the first time
no.
film festival for a long time hasn't been anywhere that felt like a spiritual home.
There was no hub, was there, basically? And
Yeah,
that is something that a festival traditionally needs, it seems to me. And it's something that's long been part of the Edinburgh Film Festival scene is chatting after the shows, meeting up with people, chance to meet directors and actors who are there, the talent that's there, chance to chat with them, as well as the question and answer sessions that happen. And they were, of course, still taking place, and plenty of those were taking place, led by primarily by the film festival director Kay Taylor, and so that side of it that was all in place. But just
yeah,
the hub and the hub that goes with a hub
yeah, yeah, yeah.
wasn't
Well,
quite there.
well, yeah. I think what happened was that when I realised that things were different was when we arrived. I think at the premiere of The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde at
Mm,
Everyman in Edinburgh, and Everyman in Edinburgh looks fairly glamorous and glitzy, and
yeah.
everybody there for the film was dressed up in suits and you know nice dresses. And I arrived with my usual sort of like film festival attire of a t-shirt and casual trousers. And it's the first time I've walked in to see a film at Edinburgh Film Festival where I suddenly felt A, underdressed,
Mm,
and B, like
mm.
I didn't really fit in. It was all a bit glitzy and
Yeah.
glam. It just didn't feel quite right. But it was a premiere, so you expect some glitz and glam at premiere.
Yeah, and which I mean, it's important that still happens. And there's still some form of media coverage going on the walkways, red carpet style.
Certainly
But
there was.
it was overall, it would be fair to say a lower key event, and what happens for next year, we will see. But within that, uh, we saw plenty of a cross section of films again, which is important. You've touched on that. I mean, we saw what, 4 or 5 British films. We saw an American Japanese film. We saw a Danish film,
Korean.
and
And Korean
so we
film.
were so we were seeing again a cross section, which is always important. And also we saw um, films from a retrospective, which was funding has come into place to bring to the fore some rediscovered films, to the two of which were with American based directors who both attended the festival, and that's a really important strand in the festival that takes place. And actually, I thought those 2 films were 2 of the most rewarding films that we viewed. One of which was
Yeah.
Variety, and then Tokyo Pop, and these were both
Yeah, well, interesting about them were the female directors turning up of
yes,
films that were made from a female point of view as well from the
mm,
1980s. There was
mm,
also the new documentary about Linda Miles, who ran
yeah,
International Film Festival in the
mm,
1970s, and she was responsible for getting its major international reputation. And she
yeah,
was the first film festival director in the world who was a woman. She held a women's event for women filmmakers in 1972, which no one else had ever done. So it was great to have female directors of the 80s who'd made films from female perspectives back at Edinburgh. It sort of tied in nicely with Edinburgh's own heritage. And I thought Variety, made by Betty Gordon in 1983, which we saw
mm.
together, was the best film we saw. But since it was an old film, you can't really champion that as the best film of the festival. But I thought it was the best film.
I think, I mean, one would regret having to champion it as the best film, but I did think it was the most complete piece of work for in terms of atmosphere, points that it was making, cinematography, performances, script. And when Betty talked about the film afterwards, and indeed before, um, very stimulating to hear that side of things. Now, one of the things I did feel was that the new British works that we saw very much summed up the state of, if you like, British film being compromised. I mean, you've talked about this before, Graham, the impact of the most successful British films of recent times, which would be, in particular, Full Monty, would be Brassed Off. And there is that
Went to light
sense,
vacuum.
yes, and absolutely. And there is that sense that we feel the need, and maybe because actually, despite so many people wanting to come and live in this country, it's a country that's quite often quite depressed with itself. And yet the films feel the need largely, other than the work of Ken Loach, to be defying all that and to have upbeat finales. And that was a
Yeah, well, yeah,
serious limitation with several of the films that we saw.
yeah. Well, if you think about Variety, it set out the theme of the film. Then it didn't explain exactly what it meant. Then it didn't resolve the story in a neat fashion. It left it
Mm,
open. It left space for the audience to think and to make their own minds up, which made it a film of depth, about a young woman in New York and how
yeah,
the whole of society, in one way or another, is just dominated by men. But compared to Chuck Chuck Baby, a new British film we saw, which was unpromisingly set in a chicken factory in a bad part of Wales, which started off quite amazingly because it had real strong working class modern themes,
yeah,
and it had strong theme of this unrequited love of 2 young women who'd been school friends who were suddenly reunited. And then
yeah,
it had a La La Land style erupting into modern song at the drop of a hat without warning, where characters would suddenly start singing slightly obscure but very nice songs from the 1970s. And so it started off so boldly. I thought, wow, this could be really good. And then, of course, as it went on, although it was always interesting and it had good bits, as it went on, all the old British film cliches and all the old
yeah,
film Monty cliches and approach
yeah.
came out and took over from the serious side. I thought, And by the end, you had to have a happy ending, obviously. So by the end, you had a fake happy ending, as all these sort of British films always have. And I
Mm,
just thought, oh wow, they've sort of undermined their own strengths here. And I thought if that approach had been taken to Variety by Betty Gordon, it wouldn't be the film that it is. So
absolutely.
you're right. It's a sort of British shooting themselves in the foot, and it's all done to get the budget to make the film and to look for audiences. That great need in the British film industry to make sure you have a successful film,
And
which of
that
course
does,
applies to all films, but it
yeah,
seems to be
but it
particularly strong in Britain.
it really compromises British filmmaking. This need to have upbeat endings. And I'm not,
Mm,
I'm not speaking as someone who's consumed in misery all the time, but Ken Loach's films are more powerful for that because they're not like that. There's a
exactly.
sense. It's Chuck Chuck Baby is a very good example of something that started with the best of intentions. I was enjoying I was enjoying it for a while, and then I thought, no, this is manipulative again. No, I don't really believe in this. No, this is too contrived. No, this is trying too hard. And then by the finale, just thinking, well, this is yet again another British film that's trying to be up there with the ones that have been successful recently, but actually ends up just not having the impact that it should. The opening film, again, another British work, Silent Roar, a Scottish film, had again, this was set in a, a Scottish island community involving surfing as part of the film. But it, again,
And religion, a lot of
suddenly it
religion.
tipped and religion, and then it
Yeah.
suddenly tipped over the edge. It went further than it needed to, although I did enjoy the Guardian review pointing out this is a spoiler alert. A building gets burnt down, and
Uh,
it did make the point that in another recent film exactly the same thing happened and no one was criticizing that. That was in the Ed Sheeran, what's it called? The not Ed Sheeran, you know the one I mean. The
yeah, I know what you
Banshees
mean.
of
It's definitely not Ed Sheeran. The Banshees of Ed Sheeran.
no,
The Banshees of Ed
which
Sheeran
had
is a good idea for a film, though.
that's the one. So that in that film again, there's a burning of a house that's very and a very
Yeah,
and yeah. The reviewer in the Guardian made the point. Well, is it fair to criticize? Well, I think actually it is. I thought that
yeah,
was again a typical touch of something looking for something big,
yeah.
grand
Well,
gesture, and the film wasn't on that scale. It just
well, the
wasn't.
problem with Silent Roar was that if it just done its Lars von Trier intense coming of age film with lots of religion
Yeah.
and lots of dramatic, bleak Scottish scenery, it would have worked. Or if it just been a little Bill Forsyth light comedy drama coming of age story set at Scottish Island, that would have worked. But instead, it was both. So one minute it was Bill Forsyth, next one it was Lars von Trier, next one it was Banshees of Inisherin, and
Mm,
it was a bold attempt to marry all those strands, which was almost doomed to never quite manage it because that's a
mm,
hard thing to pull off. So it was a very promising film, but it just tried to do too much. They should have settled on something. And yeah, the building, the church going on fire was the last straw because it'd been a film that
literally.
didn't really press easy buttons, and then it
No.
was suddenly went for the easy button.
We saw two further Scottish films. Robert Louis Stevenson, of course, Scottish author, and this was a version of The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde that pretty much took all the love story, well, did completely took the love story out of it.
Mm.
Set in Edinburgh as opposed to setting where it's traditionally set. Um,
In
you could
London quite
sense,
often.
absolutely, and you could sense a very limited budget at work, and it was
Tiny budget,
restricted
it
by
seemed to
that.
me. Mm.
Black and White, which I thought was significant and worked well within it, but again, and it was trying to make it political points. And the dominant character is not Jekyll or Hyde in this piece. Actually, it's
But a lawyer,
but the
bizarrely.
lawyer character who becomes it becomes Utterson's story and how actually he, in familiar fashion, greed takes over and uh, what might start as good political ambition turns into self satisfaction and greed, and
Mm.
so it
Well,
becomes a parable to how things are happening now. And in some ways, the actual Hyde and Jekyll story falls into the background in that, and it seemed to me to be again very restricted by budget. It came up with one new novel idea of taking it into the political field. And you made the point, Graham, when we were chatting about it. Of course, it started actually because of its National Theatre of Scotland was involved. it felt very much like a theatrical piece. The dialogue was very much in that style. The characterization was very much in that style. Even the filming was pretty much in that style as well. A lot of the camera work very close up, but effectively scenes that were contained in the style of a theatre drama. Was there
Yeah,
any
the whole
merits to
thing would
that
have
film?
worked.
Do you think?
The whole thing
Mm,
would have worked if A, they'd had a big enough budget to use the Edinburgh setting
yeah.
better, and
Yes.
B, if they'd actually put a bit more of the Dr. Jekyll Mr. Hyde violence in it. So it lost
Yeah.
its fear factor. And without that sort of like simmering fear of how horrible Mr. Hyde
Mm,
becomes, murdering women left, right, and centre, without that fear
mm,
simmering away in between the rest of the plot, the plot then becomes a completely different film, which would have worked if it had the money to make it work, but didn't have the money to make it work.
no.
But I'd like to know what size the budget was, because it seemed to be a tiny budget,
Yeah.
and for a tiny budget, it was a good film. So you've got to give them some kudos for having
Yeah.
having done what they managed to do from such a tiny budget.
So the last of the British films to reflect on is Kill, a very direct and short title. We had quite a lot of films set in woodland, including the Danish piece that we saw, which I thought was a vastly superior film to Kill. But Kill again
Yeah.
started very atmospherically with
Well, as I said
a
to like,
family of.
yeah, as I asked the
Hmm.
question to the Danish director of Superposition,
Oh yes.
because it was a bit the plot was a bit to do with quantum physics and leaping in time and stuff and time loops. I said like it was like watching Christopher Nolan's Tenet, or rather Christopher Nolan in the Woods. So
Yes.
I'm not sure the Danish director, Caroline
Entirely appreciated your point.
Lingby, actually liked that remark. But then when we saw Kill set in Scotland, a sort of intense thriller with lots of violence about a dysfunctional family. Again, it was all in the woods, and so I said to you, like, well, it's basically like Monica the Glen in the woods. That's all it is. So there's a real woods theme going on at this year's film festival. But Kill was
I
better than Kill
yes.
worked better because it was more coherent. It didn't make as many compromises. It didn't try and do too much than some of the other British films we saw. But I think the only problem with Kill, as you will agree as well, is that it became a loop of violence
Yeah.
with slightly different members of the cast doing the same thing over and over again. And I noticed
Mm.
that with about half an hour to go. I was thinking like
There was a
the same things
repetition that
happening
took it
over and
over.
over again.
Mm,
It needed
mm.
it needed one last plot twist. If there had one last plot twist in Kill to take your mind away from just the constant scenes of fighting in the woods, it would have been really good.
Performances were really good within it.
Yeah,
Um,
certainly. They're very intense.
there was one actor that was familiar to those who have seen uh, in the thick of it, who plays the father, the psycho father. But what was interesting was probably more the younger performances, which were really. I thought that was the best thing about the film. That
Mm-hmm.
actually for the performances, whatever was thrown at them, and you're right, there was an air of repetition about it, but I thought this sustained that side of it, the intensity and the relationship between the fractured, dysfunctional relationships were really well played out. And I did like the camera work within the piece as well. They had really good faces. They weren't familiar actors, but they were well chosen
Heard from
for.
TV.
For the,
I've seen them in
yeah.
TV dramas before, but never in
Mm.
film. But I thought the
I,
word visceral, which is thrown around quite a lot about
yes.
films, I thought
Yeah.
it was a genuinely visceral film,
Yeah.
which you can't
It
see.
got it did. It got you in the gut. It did as a film do
Mm.
that, didn't it?
It
So
was
if
definitely a
we were to
punch to
pick
the gut, that's for sure. It was a punch to the gut in that film.
if we were to pick the best film that we saw, which way are
Well,
you going?
well, Variety, except that's an old film, and I had
Mm.
the pleasure of chatting to Betty Gordon, director,
Yes.
afterwards, and
Yeah.
I told her what I thought about the film from a man's point of
You,
view,
you
which
did.
wasn't being rude,
She barely got
because
a
I'm a
word in
man.
edge. She barely got a word in edgeways with you, Graham. You
Yeah,
did.
she was very she was clearly a very sharp, very
Yes.
intelligent person. I could tell that if I'd let her say anything at all, she would have made mincemeat of me. I could tell she was perfectly capable of arguing me about feminism and filmmaking for sure. But I thought the
Yeah.
best film we saw was Past Lives, the Korean film,
Yes.
directed by Celine Song, and starring
Mm,
Greta Lee and Teo Yoo
mm,
as two young Koreans whose lives change direction after school, and she goes off to emigrate to New York to follow her career ambitions, and he's still in South Korea, and it's all about how it's a bit sort of like a elongated version of When Harry Met Sally without the
yes.
laughs, and it was such a poignant, bittersweet, but
Mm,
absolutely resolutely understated, fantastically acted, and well scripted film. It was just, I forgot it was in Korean. I mean, obviously it's subtitles, but I
mm,
forgot I was watching technically a
mm,
foreign film. It was just a great
mm.
film.
It again, spoiler alert. It, what it avoided was perhaps the climax that if you were to put it past a jury as to how to finish the film, it would have finished differently. And you and I were quite torn on the thought as to whether actually that should have been different, the ending, or in fact,
Mm,
actually, one of the things that was very striking about the film, for all the fact that there's a romantic link that continues between the two of them, the female character is a pragmatist and makes
mm,
pragmatic decisions,
that's
and
right. Yeah,
and so even the final decision,
that's Greta Lee. That the woman makes
yes,
pragmatic decisions. The man Teo is
yeah,
much more deeply romantic.
he is, and intuitive that way as well. He's, if you like, is he would be the one that would write a novel. She would tap away at computers, and
Well,
um,
he's actually more
but
honest about his
yes,
emotions than she is.
he is, and whether one can say she's a realist, but she makes pragmatic steps
Yeah,
each way, and constantly does so. But I love the marriage of Korean culture and American culture within the piece.
it was
Um,
really well done.
it was, and now I mean, as to what circuit it will play,
I think it'll be
hope,
successful.
hope,
It's a
yeah,
great film, and it's only at the end you realise how sad it is. It's
mm,
basically an anti-romantic romance that ends
yes,
anti-romantically. And
yeah.
what you want to happen when you're watching it is you want this anti-romantic romance to end at least a little bit romantically. And without telling you the end of the film, but telling all the listeners, especially in Switzerland, where we're very popular, how it ends, it does end anti-romantically,
It does.
which I wondered at the time why I felt slightly disappointed about it being such a great film. And
Mm,
afterwards, when I was chatting to you at the View, I think it was, we both
mm,
decided that it needed to be a nicer ending. It just needed to be a
mm.
nicer ending. And the film was so determined to stick to its guns that it went for a very pragmatic ending. And it was like, oh no, really? It's a bit like when someone does a great run in football from his own half,
Yeah,
beats six players, has an
yeah,
open goal, and
and
you're
misses.
just about to like
Mm.
erupt in applause, and he slams it past the post. It's like, oh god, really?
I don't think that would. I mean, yes, I would have liked that ending, but I don't think it weakens the film overall. I thought it was really, really well judged. Let's just, let's hope that the Everyman Circuit will play it. That City Screen Picture House would play it in New York. Let's hope that that does happen, because I do think it is a film that is well worth seeing. And I think there's some potential for superposition as well. Again, yeah, I think
Yeah, it
um,
was good.
because and to be honest, I did actually prefer it to Christopher Nolan's Tenet. So I think
Mm.
it did. Well, did it make more sense than that? Well, I think it
It
played
made
it,
slightly more sense, yeah.
it played at a pace. It played at a pace that one could cope with, whereas Tenet just got it became
Yeah, well,
too much, really.
I asked the director, so are we to believe that version one of this character had actually been killed by version two of this character?
Mm,
And she couldn't really answer the question.
she couldn't. No,
So that's
no.
how mind spinning it was. Although you're right, compared to Christopher Nolan's
Mm,
Tenet, it was pretty
mm.
straightforward.
Yeah. So, well, let's say thank you for Edinburgh International Film Festival for taking place again, and
Yeah, I thought it was
let's
good.
look forward, hopefully, to the 77th one next year, and we'll see how it shapes up, whether it's going to be like this for the future. I do hope that somehow a hub can be restored for the festival. I do think it needs that. I
It needs
definitely
somewhere
miss.
that belongs to them. It needs,
Correct,
because the
correct.
great thing about Linda Miles' project documentary we saw about Linda Miles is when you saw the footage and photographs of her and Jim Hickey in the film house or the
Mhm.
film festival base, because the film house wasn't built at that point, the film festival base, you
Yeah,
could tell it belonged to them. It was their place. They
yeah.
did what they want, which is
Mm.
why it became great. So it needs its own base so it can be itself.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So we didn't take in any fringe shows, although um, we did kind of note how Graham Linehan ended up performing his show in this world of cancel culture outside the Scottish Parliament. Um, this is a show that's rooted in the gender discussions, um, and at least he did do his performance. I worry that if cancel culture takes over of arts festivals, that is disturbing. There should be freedom of voice to say things. The other one that made me laugh was to see that Jerry Sadowitz, who was cancel cultured after one show last year, um, he restricted himself or in advance to doing 3 shows and called it last year's show. And I thought that was tremendous that he called it that.
Yeah, it's a great
Um,
idea. Yeah, great name.
um, so I mean, Edinburgh was busy. I mean, it was clearly the busiest fringe since its return from COVID. And there's a good piece in the Observer today by Stuart Lee talking not least about wokeism, which of course is very much well. He keeps being asked, is woke culture ruining comedy? I think we noted there was a lot of gender politics within a lot of the stories that were taking part in the fringe, but there was a buzz about it, which was good to see. And uh, I think the fact that people have been worried about the cost of it, well, what used to be people used to be able to rent student accommodation. Housing has have been turned into Airbnbs, so people have been worried about the cost of being able to go up there. But it did still look very, very busy, and also significantly, it did still look very, very international as well, which is important. It is a reminder of arts being for everyone and from everywhere, and in a narrow world. Where Sunak thinks it's more important to have a world of maths rather than a world of art. Edinburgh International Festival and the Film Festival and the Fringe Festival and the Book Festival, etc., all remind you that is not the case.
I agree, but to bring it back down to earth, I was more excited with the fact that when we went for lunch at Valvona
Mm,
Crolla, which is one of the best Italian cafes and delis in the whole
yeah,
of Britain, family run, fantastic place. Dennis Lawson walked past us on the way to the loo. I
it
was
did.
quite excited.
Mm.
But wasn't he in Local Hero, that Bill Forsyth film? I can't remember
Um,
now.
I can't remember. We also spotted John Culshaw. That was one of the other celebrity spots just walking through the streets. He was in the musical about Lena Zavaroni, which is being tipped to transfer to the West End, which would be interesting
I
to see
wouldn't be
if that
surprised.
does
It
if that
ticks so
does
many
happen.
boxes in terms of contemporary
Yes.
storylines because
Well,
it's
Graham, you
about
made an interesting point about how now when you write stories to get hits, what you have to look
mm,
for. And actually, it
mm.
struck me that it mirrors, in some ways, what makes shows likely to be transferred into the West End. And emotion is now a big part of that.
It has to have an emotional hook line based
Mm,
on some family, social, mental, or physical condition that the person's had to battle against. And if you make that the theme of what your play or film or anything's about, it already ticks the right boxes.
yes.
Selena Zavaroni's story, which also includes showbiz, singing, it's got a lot, even though she was only a big
Tragedy.
star for
Mm, mm,
comparatively, small number of years.
mm.
She's still quite a unique figure, and her story does tick all the right boxes.
Absolutely. Now, we didn't go to the Grayson Perry Smash Hits, but that's running till November the 12th. And the pair of us are both, we're likely to go back to Edinburgh to see that exhibition. We did see plenty of exhibitions. And I think one
I think
focus
we
was
saw
on
five.
yeah,
We saw five major
one focus was
exhibitions,
on the
and
work of,
four of them were about female artists. The interesting thing was
yes,
that the first time I ever went to five major galleries in Edinburgh that we usually go to,
Mm.
I have done for a long time. And
Mm.
4 of the 5 were female artists, and that's
Yes.
got to be the first time that's happened. And I felt a real sea change in the representation in the arts world of women in what we saw at Edinburgh.
Mm. The the significant within that, obviously, at the Dovecut studio, 250 years of Scottish women artists. So, and I thought that was a of Elizabeth Blackadder, of the more recent artists, and beyond Elizabeth's work, right up to the contemporary artists, and then going all the way back 250 years. It was beautifully put together, superb curating of an exhibition, and it is. I love that exhibition space. It's the former swimming baths where we, of course, saw the Russian Othello there. So, and
Well, yeah,
there's a bar,
interestingly,
as we
the Russian
spotted.
Othello,
Mm.
the Russian
Mm.
Othello was great, but that was about, good grief, that's 25 years ago or something.
Yeah.
And the great Edinburgh arts impresario and pioneer Richard DeMarco brought this Russian theatrical troupe across to do Othello in
Mm.
Russian in a swimming pool. So they were all in swimming
Mm.
costumes, either running around the pool or in the pool on swimming or on floats. And it was quite
Yeah.
dangerous because there was water splashing everywhere. And
Exactly.
they were running
Exactly.
along. And that little expression, break a leg,
Mm.
could have come out to play. So we were wandering around looking at the 2 or 3 years of Scottish women artists at
Mm.
Dovecut, which
Mm.
was just mind-blowingly good. All these artists that half of whom I'd never heard of at all. And it was just
That
all
that was the other joy, wasn't
great
it?
stuff.
Discovering
Yeah.
artists that we didn't know. Yes.
But we saw this, I saw the video at one point, the director of the gallery is in a video,
Mm.
and you see the gallery in the video from above. And I spotted the balcony. I thought that balcony looks like the balcony of the
Yes.
swimming pool. And
And it
and then we
was.
saw a sign elsewhere in the same
Yeah.
building saying baths, obviously a
Yeah.
vintage sign. And we suddenly realized that that was exactly the same place that we'd been
Mm.
to see Othello all those years ago. So it was great to be there.
Elizabeth Blackadder featured in that exhibition, but also she has a much bigger exhibition with her fellow artist John Houston, who was her husband and fellow artist, and that's at the Royal Scottish Academy. A really comprehensive exhibition, and I loved her work. I
Mm.
mean, she of course, you're a little biased on this, Graham, because Grangemouth next to Falkirk, and she's a Falkirk artist. Um,
Yeah,
but
I was
it
born
was
in fall.
you were born in Falkirk, exactly. You were
Mm.
son of Falkirk, um, and it was an exhibition that, um, if we're brutally honest, probably I think we would both say that we think that Elizabeth is the superior artist out of the two in that relationship, but actually, Houston's work as well. The he had a more structured sense always of his work. What I loved with Elizabeth Blackadder was it was more unpredictable what she would do. Her use of objects, her use of perspective, very significant. That often
Very
she would
flat.
work somehow that it was very flat, and that made it more interesting. His great skill, John's great skill, which we noted a lot, was landscape, where seascape meets land, or sky meets land, or sky meets sea. That
And
primarily, so the
he's
structure of his work much more
yeah,
rigid.
but
Um,
he also did great portraits and great scenes
yes.
with multiple people,
Mm.
but they were very Edvard Munch in style. And the thing about John
They
Huston
were.
was it was great art, was that Elizabeth Blackadder seemed to take her influences and turn everything into Elizabeth Blackadder. Whereas
Yes.
John Huston, whose work is very good, and I really enjoyed seeing it, he he didn't quite transcend these influences. It ended up a
Yeah.
sort of like a conglomeration of influences without truly becoming original itself. Whereas Elizabeth
Mm.
Blackadder, absolutely gobsmackingly good. It's sort of a little bit of David Hockney in terms of her
Yeah.
use of color and the flatness, but a little bit oddly a little bit of surrealism, even though she clearly wasn't a surrealist.
You spotted.
But but
I seem to
apart from
recall
those
there
two
was.
influences, it was clearly all her own work. It was just
Yeah.
her own vision, and it was always very attractive to look at, very imaginative, full of life. And I was just dazzled. It's no surprise
Mm.
she was the first woman artist to be elected to both the Royal Scottish Academy
Yeah.
and the Royal Academy in London, because she's so underrated. I mean, some of the paintings were up for sale for 5 or 6 grand, and they were that's ridiculously cheap for what they are. They're just absolutely
Mm.
brilliant.
Some were for sale for more like 21,000 as well. But
That's true. Yeah. Yeah.
the other exhibition, and I really urge people to do an Edinburgh visit, see Grayson Perry, but do see Peter Howson's work as well. That
Mm.
was some of the most brutal political and religious work. An extraordinary artist, and the thing with his exhibition as well is there's a series of on each floor the interview runs on each floor, and what he has is a new interview with him, and he's had troubled times, with drug addiction and alcohol addiction. Very frank about all that, and not least relationship
Yeah,
with
he never
family.
quite recovered from being the
No,
official British war artist during the Bosnian conflict. And what he saw
yes,
there, the horrors, completely, he never quite got past that. Hence his descent
no,
into alcohol and drug abuse. But I thought that the paintings before Bosnia, which are mainly street scenes and
yeah,
lone figures, were extraordinary
mm,
renditions of
mm,
life at its grittiest, but with real poetry and beauty. And then the Bosnian paintings he did are some of the saddest paintings I've ever seen because
yeah,
he just shows the horror of the war in a very matter of fact, almost nice way. The paintings remain colourful, the
mm,
trees look gorgeous, and then you notice there's like some poor chap hanging from a rope. And
yeah,
it's just those I've seen other war artists in the flesh and exhibitions for different
mm,
wars, different British war artists. And I thought Peter Howson's were the most impactful
yeah.
and the most affecting that I've ever seen.
You've been listening to the podcast Two Big Egos in a Small Car. Your hosts were Graham Chalmers and Charles Hutchinson. This was a Baltic sub production.